So, hello everyone. My name is Juan D. I'm on San Francisco University. Actually, I'm doing this work from General Sociology degree, and I'm here with Hanna. Hanna is from Kenyon College, and she's studying a psychological degree. So, Hanna, if you want, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. I'm Hannah. I'm a sophomore at Kenyon College. I'm studying psychology. And yeah, this is for my Latin psychology class.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I would like to introduce you and the people that we will be looking this podcast about the topic that we will be talking about. So today we're focusing on the right to vote and run or apply for public positions for people with limited education and potential voting rights for underage individuals. What are your initial thoughts about these topics?
Yeah, well, I think especially in, any country really where you've got sort of a large young population with sort of vested interest in the political sort of state of the country, there's definitely sort of debate to what age is the point where we decide that
Mhm.
people are at the capacity to make those decisions and vote on them. And I think it is sort of something that it evolves with the time and sort of the culture of the country at the time.
Yeah, talking about the culture, for example, and taking account in the United States will be in elections tomorrow, right?
Yes, yes, exactly.
So it's
Um,
an interesting topic to take in account now. Uh,
Definitely.
I would like to introduce the first topic about voting for people without formal education. So, do you believe that education should be a requirement to participate in elections? Why or why not?
Yeah, so I think it is kind of a complicated topic because
Mhm.
education, the way that we define it is sort of loose. We can define it formally as what kind of schools have you gone to, what kind of degrees do you have, that sort of thing. But we also know that people learn through, different means, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
education that you gain just by living your life. And there's many different sort of forms of education across all different countries, but even in the United States, not everybody has a formal schooling experience. Some people get
Mhm.
homeschooled, so it does kind of bring to mind if it's really a question of what degrees do you have, what grades do you have,
Mhm.
or is it about sort of your knowledge of current events or kind of the state of the country, because you can
Mhm.
go through school without sort of learning those things, and the other way around, you can pick up on those things without being in
Uh,
school.
yes, and I agree with you in that way. And I got another question because as you said, for example, in United States, you have the another chances for study
Yeah.
and possibilities, etc. So, in case of somebody that has no formal education, what challenges do you think that those individuals without formal education face when they propose themselves as candidates?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're proposing yourself as a candidate for the any sort of electoral office, I think people in America it is very education centric, and there's such a heavy sort of emphasis on the formal university and sort of
Mhm.
what degrees do you have and sort of what that can mean for you. And so looking at that from kind of the general public's perspective, there is definitely a bias towards people who have sort of that a formal education. And so individuals that don't, I think, may go into it and face people that think that they are less qualified and ultimately just doubt
Yeah.
them.
I just think that is the same. And talking about, for example, qualified, um, you know, actually in Ecuador, we have a huge problem because our population is not all at all. like has these chances for studying, and
Mhm.
that it is involved not just in the candidates, in the voters too.
Yeah.
So you have some argue, or what's your thing about the people without education may not have the competency, or may have to make informed choices if they get elected, or in this case if they choose someone, and yeah, what is your thing about this?
Yeah, I think, that there are a lot of ways to measure competency that don't necessarily line up with, your formal education. There are a lot of things that we put emphasis on, in the United States that may not, you may not necessarily be using, some sort of, science
Hmm.
classes that you had to spend
Yeah.
tons of time on in school if you wanted to run for office. And so I think that I would tend to, argue that there to be in a position to be in an elected position, usually your role is to kind of be a good representation of the people that you were elected
Yeah.
by. And so I don't think that that necessarily that always means that you have to have that education. It really is dependent on what you are trying to sort of run for and what you're trying to sort of put yourself in a position of.
I agree with you. For example, here in Ecuador, we will have elections in February.
Mhm.
So it's just the same. Not always it is important to have an scholar degree for taking a decision for a candidate, but because people knows which are their needless, but
Yeah.
not in the whole cases. For example, when you vote about for someone that is running for example, assembly or something like that, it's more representative of people, but in the same way maybe or probably it is it needs someone that knows. So that is the problem that we have.
Yeah.
About the voting impact, in your view, does the participation of voters with lower education levels significantly influence in elections or no?
Yeah. I think, that it probably does significantly influence the outcomes in terms of, you know, where you are looking at the viewing or the voter pool. Maybe there is a maybe in that area lower education is more common, so
Mm-hmm.
you are going to have a significant amount of voters with a lower education level, and so in that area that is going to significantly make up what the portion of the votes are. um but I don't think as with anything, equal voting power sort of
Yeah.
that sort of principle stays
Mm-hmm.
with the fact that there might be a fear from people that, oh, if somebody isn't educated, then their vote is going to damage these outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that with most things, if the your voting power per person tends to be equal,
Yes.
I think I would argue maybe against that idea.
Yeah, and that's the thing. For example, in case of Ecuador, in our past constitutions, for example, everybody was taking account some benefits for participating in elections, and
Mhm.
there is not that argument that everybody was equal, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult. For example, I'm studying law, so for example, in the past century, for participating in elections you supposed to be married, had a lot
Oh,
of
wow.
money, a lot of things.
Yeah.
So maybe the 10% of the population was going to vote. So that's the argument that each vote counts. And
Mhm.
taking account that argument of each vote counts, it will, if you want, we can talk about now about voting rights for underage individuals. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about the current legal voting age? It is appropriate or should it be changed?
Yeah. I mean, I think, in the United States, I think 18, since we typically tend to define most things as being, that's the age that you become a legal adult. So that's, I guess we define, you become an adult, that's when you earn the right to vote. I think, like anything, this is really kind of subject to person. And also,
Hmm.
I think it changes. I think maybe 20 years ago, if you thought about, what the average 18-year-old knew about the state of the country, it would be different to today. I think that with most things, it's in the right range. I don't know if I personally feel strongly that it shouldn't be, that it should be 18 over, say, like 16 or 20, but I think I think I generally tend to see that the logic there is that once we define ourselves as kind of adults, we make our own
Hmm.
decisions, we separate ourselves from our families. That's when we are kind of given the right to vote.
Yeah, and that's the thing. For example, and taking account the next question, do you think that the individuals below the legal voting age poses to maturity on political awareness needed to participate in elections? And why I make this question for it's because, for example, if in my last knowledge about United States, for example, you considerate people for driving license for 16, right? So
Yeah, you're
there is that
16.
kind of maturity that we are talking about. But for example, for going party or drink, it's 21, right? So
Mhm.
maybe it's kind of different. What is your thing about it? Because actually, as you said, um, probably now teenagers, young people are more involved in political than old people. For
Mhm.
example, we have the case in our world of Greta Thunberg, right? So for
Mhm.
example, that's an example of changing of getting involved in political. So what you're thinking about these voting age poses of maturity and political for participating in elections?
Yeah, I definitely think with the introduction of sort of social media and technology into more young people and even children's sort of lives and educations even. I think that that has allowed this generation to
Hmm.
stay much more involved in current events. I think it was, you know, even thinking back to my parents' generation to get, a piece of information about the news or, politics, they may have had to go through an adult first. So you don't necessarily have as much power to kind of have that original thought. And so I do think there is maturity that this generation has in terms of the knowledge and the I guess also the kind of desire to seek out that knowledge and to watch the news and to
Yes.
all of that. So I think it is something that with all of the young people that we see being active and speaking out about politics in our country, it does make you wonder how can that person have such strong opinions about it and but they can't even really do anything about it in terms of
Yeah.
voting officially. And it is definitely, there's I think often discussion about there's a lot of different legal, ages for different, points in your life in America, like driving and drinking and all that. And so it
Yes.
does kind of, it seems kind of what are the factors that we are
Exactly.
evaluating
Uh-huh.
an adult by or someone that can do these things by.
So and talking about this, what's your opinion about young people that can already influence in politics?
Yeah, I think that it is, I think people are very quick to older generations especially can be very quick to write off people below a certain age as not, having the proper experience or, formal education to
Hmm.
form really, grounded opinions about, topics like politics because things I think, adults see kids as not knowing anything about politics or government or that
Exactly.
realm of the world. And I think what we find is that, you know, kids are very perceptive and they're always listening,
Yeah,
and they feel very strongly about and very emotional about the issues because they are going to be affecting them the most because they are the ones that are going to have to grow up and live in this world. So I think,
exactly.
you know, we really need to listen to the younger generation because they're the ones who are going to be driving progress.
And I think in the same way as you, in Spanish, there's a phrase that usually our politics say, that is that young people has the choice for our present, because about the future, it is not. They consider that the really important voting focus people is the young people, because we are taking our decisions for our present, because our present will be our future at least. So yeah, it's kind of that things. And
Yeah.
talking about another thing, I sent you an article about
Mhm.
of Austral University of Chile. So it talks about, in a brief explanation, it talks about the right of vote for underage people, that electoral capacity, and around the ability of participate on the elections, and it has two kind of thinkings about it. So it talks about, in a first way, about, yeah, it is a possibility, but at the same time it talks about that maybe it is not, because if you
Mhm.
consider that you have, for example, this responsibility for taking about your, I don't know, your criminal acts, or as we were talking about, driving or drinking or etc., why you cannot vote. And at the same time, it says that, for example, 16 years old people maybe has not the studies enough, or the this cognitive capacity developed too, for taking about in someone in elections, etc. So, first of all, which are your thinkings about this article? Maybe what you can rescue about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of sort of valid arguments as to why the voting age could sort of be lowered. I think one of the main takeaways here is that, sort of in what we've been talking about, is that it is very arbitrary, you know, the way that we set these things up, and we don't have always a firm sort of guideline for uh the way that we decide to uh cut off, you know, the age at certain point. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that mainly the sort of, I guess, main point is that, like, what differentiates someone at age 18 from, you know, age 16 or 17? Do we really have
Exactly.
evidence to show that there's a significant gap in knowledge there that would justify kind of uh, not allowing those younger people to vote? And uh, also that ultimately the goal is to kind of um, you know, I guess find sort of not necessarily complete equality, but we're trying to make a more inclusive
Exactly.
voting
Mm-hmm.
system. So it doesn't make sense in a lot of ways to restrict it further.
And I got a question about it. Taking account this article, or your own arguments, do you think that there are potential benefits or risk about allowing underage peoples to vote?
Yeah, I think, you know, there are definitely like anything, I think risks are allowing more people to vote does, you know, make the voting base as a whole, you know, it makes it larger. And so if you are assuming that there are some people in there who are not taking it seriously, or maybe are, you know, just kind of writing in whatever on the ballot, then that is kind of a negative, I guess, effect
Exactly.
of that. And
Hmm.
that takes away from the voices of the people who are really
Interested.
serious about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, there is value, I think, in having all of these sort of you know opinions and votes, and sort of knowing what the youth is feeling. And we do kind of have to go in with a certain assumption of good faith that people are actually interested, because I do think there is more of a perception that younger people don't care than is
Yeah.
actually the truth.
And you touched that area. We do not like talk about this in this podcast, but for example, what do you think about for example, in my country, voting is not a right, is something that you must do. Is
Mhm.
and I think that in your country is different, like everybody goes to vote.
Yes.
What's your opinion about it? Because in my opinion, I consider that in my system, it will be well if we apply the American system about everybody. The facultative vote is the word that we used to say. That is, you vote if you want. You vote if
Mhm.
it is in your decisions. So, what's
Yes.
your opinion about this?
Yeah, so I've met plenty of people who have said to me before that they don't vote just because
Hmm.
they don't know enough about the political process. And there are a lot of I think strong opinions about if you have the ability to vote. There are people who think you need to vote. It is, you have to vote, because if you're not voting, you're not doing your civic duty as an American. You're not
Yeah.
filling, what. And also, there are so many people, who cannot vote, and who would, fight for the right to vote, but still cannot. So it doesn't, in a lot of ways, it seems almost like the general consensus is, if you have the ability to vote, you should vote. But there's also, I
Exactly.
think, the other side, which is, if you don't feel like you are properly informed to make a decision,
Hmm.
should you force yourself to vote, because you know then you're putting your vote towards something you don't actually really believe in. And I think that gets even more we talk about it a lot, especially these days, because I think in modern times, especially in the main presidential election,
Uh-huh.
the candidates can be very divisive, and people often say, I don't like either one, so I'm just not going to vote because I don't want to have to make a
Exactly.
decision. And so, there are a lot of kind of viewpoints on that. My
Hmm.
personal viewpoint, I guess, is I really do strongly believe that, like, it's very important that if you have the ability to vote,
Hmm.
because you know, people think it doesn't matter, but everyone having that mindset is what
Yeah.
causes, things to not actually, people don't vote. And I think in America, especially, I mean, I don't really know about, as much about other countries, but voting amongst young people is something that really needs to increase, if anything. So it's
Mm.
really just, I think, if anything, it's really something we should encourage.
In my opinion, for example, it must be open for everyone if they want to vote. But
Mhm.
is the something that the state must do is for get informed everybody that everybody can vote,
Yeah.
because sometimes they do not know, or they said, just as you said, like, for example, I don't like this one, I don't like this one too, so
Yeah.
I will not vote. But for example, what happens in my country, uh it because it's something that you must do. uh People, it's just like, for example, the same example that you gave me. I do not like this one or this one, I just go and vote whatever I think, or
Yeah.
just getting blank or something like that. So probably is that duty that you said, like, this right that we have. But at the same time, the solution about the topics that we were talking about, for example, the underage people without education, it must be less considered if it is open. for everyone that
Mhm.
really wants to make a change, for
Yeah.
example. So probably that will be the solution. And for conclude this, in summary, what do you believe about the most important factors to consider when discussing voting rights for underage people, and for limited education too?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to consider is what kind of access do the population that we're looking at, in this case, young people, what access do they have to, resources to learn about uh, current events and politics in their country? And I think if the answer is that there are sufficient resources, then I think the solution there is to think about opening up,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps voting rights to younger people. And I think if the answer is that there aren't enough resources to educate young people, I think the concern is not how do we make
Mm-hmm.
sure that the voting age is older so that we, make sure that these people don't vote. I think it's more always about how do we educate people. I think that's the main thing, is really the educating people comes first, and then everything else falls into place after that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you so much. It was a
Yes,
nice
thank you.
interview. I love these exchange virtual programs.
Yes,
Uh, I learned a lot about your perspective, and I
yes, as
hope
well.
people do it too. So thank you so much,
Yes,
and goodbye.
yes, thank you.